were the superstars of doing the dirty work, the glue guys, the players whose impact on the court wasn't necessarily showcased in the box score or with individual accolades, and yet they were instrumental in their team's success. Some of these players were underrated their whole careers, while some were legitimate superstars but are now almost forgotten. Here are the most underrated players in NBA history. Starting with the first great NBA center, whose legacy rarely gets appreciated anymore. No, we're not talking about Wilt Chamberlain or Bill Russell, but the guy who preceded them from the time the Lakers still played in Minneapolis. Of course, we're talking about George Mikan, the first superstar in NBA history, and arguably the most impactful player ever. Today, the NBA is one of the most famous sports league in the world, and many people give credit to guys like Russell, Chamberlain, and Oscar Robertson for pushing the NBA forward. After them, Bird and Magic get credit for saving the NBA in the 80s, and Jordan for making the NBA the global phenomenon it is today. But maybe none of that would be possible without Mikan. In the late 40s and early 50s, the 6'10" center was by far the best and most popular basketball player in the world, and the NBA used to send him to different cities days before the game to promote the sport. Because of Mikan's dominance, the NBA widened the lane from 6 to 12 feet, instituted goaltending, and most importantly, implemented the 24-second shot clock in 1954. Before this rule, teams would often stall the game as much as possible, so Mikan wouldn't get the ball, which resulted in games finishing 19 to 18, the lowest score in NBA history. Mikan won 7 championships in his first 8 seasons, leading the league in scoring 5 times. Every center that ever came through the NBA has practiced the Mikan drill at some point.
Very simple drill. You're just going to shoot a little baby bank hook shot from right in front of the rim with both your right hand and your left hand, and you alternate.
And because of his dominance, impact on the rules, and popularity he brought to the NBA, he is one of the most important players of all time, but rarely gets the recognition for it. Honorable mention from that era goes to Bob Pettit, another Hall of Fame center from the 50s who's now mostly forgotten. Apart from winning playoff series and an NBA championship against Bill Russell, Pettit averaged 26 points and 16 rebounds for his career. And other than his final season, he made the first team All-NBA every year of his career. Fast forward 40 years from the days of Mikan and Pettit, and the NBA was a rocket ship, a global brand worth billions of dollars. The league's best and most popular player was Michael Jordan, and in his shadow was Scottie Pippen.
I always admired Scottie Pippen and his game and appreciated him. He's the most disrespected all-time great player in any sport that any game has seen. Unfortunately for Scottie, when you look back at those championship runs, he doesn't have like the signature moment.
Michael Jordan was glorified and admired by the entire world, and rightfully so, because he really was him, and was the best player of his era. But as it was documented in The Last Dance, MJ often got too much credit at the expense of Pippen and the rest of the Bulls. Michael won Defensive Player of the Year, but Pippen was a better defender than Jordan. It was Scottie, and not Michael, who was usually guarding the best opposing player, and Pippen's presence allowed Jordan to play free safety on defense.
Michael had problems with a certain player. Anyone who can catch and shoot and run around the screen, hated chasing the screen because he was a ball watcher. You know, he gambled all the time
because he knew that Pippen had his back. In 1994, when Jordan retired for the first time, Pippen led the Bulls to 55 wins, which is just 2 wins less than the previous year when Jordan was still with the team. MJ was a superior scorer and a better leader than Scottie, but he also never won a playoff series without Pippen, while Scottie nearly advanced to the 1994 Conference Finals without Michael.
Now Pippen on the move. Look at accelerate. Pippen down the lane, and that is Scottie.
Ryder takes it and blocked away by Scottie.
The rest of the Bulls from the 90s were also quite underrated, while the world was infatuated with Jordan. From the first three-peat, a guy that never gets mentioned is P.J. Armstrong, one of the best shooters of all time, currently ranking 13th all-time in three-point percentage, tied with Steph Curry. From the second three-peat, there's Ron Harper, one of the best defensive point guards ever, who averaged 19 points per game before he joined the Bulls, but still accepted his spot as a role player. The same goes for Tony Kukoc, who could have easily been an all-star if he had played on another team and had the opportunity to take more shots. Jordan was a great player.
You can't get too close to Mike with a foul.
His teammates, especially Pippen, were heavily underrated. But there's another small forward whose game was very similar to Scottie's, and he never gets mentioned among the all-time greats, despite winning 8 NBA titles and scoring over 26,000 points in his career.
He gets it out. People have a
John Havlicek will rarely get mentioned when there's a discussion about the best small forwards ever. Yet, he made more All-NBA teams than Larry Bird and more All-Defensive teams than Kawhi Leonard and LeBron James. Averaging 21 points, 6 rebounds, and 5 assists for his career, Hondo leads the Celtics in many statistical categories. And with 13 All-Star selections, only 12 other NBA players in NBA history rank above this underrated Celtics legend. And similar to Havlicek, this next all-time great is one of the best players ever at his position, but almost never gets mentioned in debates for the best centers of all time. Moses Malone was an undersized center at 6'10", and yet he led the NBA in rebounding 6 times and ranks 3rd all-time in rebounds, behind only Bill Russell and Wilt Chamberlain. Malone won 3 MVPs. Only 5 other players have won more. And if we count the points he scored in the ABA, Big Mo racked up nearly 30,000 points, which ranks 9th all time. Due to his shyness around the media, Moses was underrated when he played, and he's even more underappreciated now, despite being arguably a top 5 center of all time. However, Malone isn't the most underrated big man from this era. There's one player that most casual fans probably haven't even heard of, despite him scoring over 27,000 points, which ranks 12th all time. And that guy is Big E, Elvin Hayes, a 12-time All-Star and a 1978 NBA champion with the Washington Bullets. Other than Wilt Chamberlain, Hayes is the only player who led the NBA in scoring as a rookie, averaging 28.4 points and 17 rebounds. Apart from being one of the top scorers of all time, Hayes is also one of the best rebounders ever, with over 16,000 boards, which ranks 4th on the all-time list. And if the NBA counted blocks in his first 5 seasons, Hayes would rank in the top 10 in blocks, too. Other Hall of Fame centers from that era that are almost forgotten now are the 1973 MVP Dave Cowens, 8-time All-Star Bob Lanier, who averaged 20 and 10 for his career, and another former MVP, Bob McAdoo, who was also a 3-time scoring champion. And speaking of scoring champs, let's talk about the player who won this prestigious title in 1983, a guy whom they called the Blade long before Wesley Snipes. Alex English is one of only 25 players with over 25,000 points in the NBA, and he's almost never mentioned in the same breath as other scoring champs like Allen Iverson or Tracy McGrady, even though English scored more points than all of them and did it more efficiently. The Nuggets legend English averaged 25.9 points per game during his 11-year tenure in Denver, shooting over 50% from the field, along with 5.6 rebounds and 4.4 assists. There's another scoring legend from that era that might be even better than Alex English, and another guy that nobody mentions anymore.
Few of these kids know that the crossing guard they're high-fiving in that bright green jacket in a Silver Spring, Maryland crosswalk is an NBA Hall of Famer, an Olympic gold medalist, and a millionaire.
Adrian Dantley is a 2-time scoring champ who averaged 24.3 points for his whole career and did so with insanely good efficiency. Dantley shot 54% from the field during his 15 years in the league, which is better than any other player who scored over 20,000 points other than Barkley, Shaq, and Kareem, who were all playing much closer to the basket than the 6'5" Dantley. Also, Dantley has 4 seasons with over 30 points per game, and only Jordan, Wilt, and Oscar Robertson have more. But because Dantley played for Utah and in a small market, he never got the proper recognition, despite being a 6-time All-Star. And this next player was an 11-time All-Star and a Hall of Famer, and yet he was always in the shadow of his much more popular teammates. Chris Bosh had all the skills in the world. He wreaked havoc from the post. He could shoot.
Bosh for the lead. Got it!
He was a strong and mobile defender, and he was pretty efficient too. When he was the first option in Toronto, CB averaged 23 points and 10 rebounds between 2005 and 2010, establishing himself as the premier power forward when it was one of the deepest positions in the NBA. And then Bosh became part of the Miami Heat's Big Three, and he was the one who had to sacrifice the most. Taking a backseat to LeBron and D-Wade, Bosh's numbers declined. His role in Miami's 2 championships was undeniable. After the loss in the 2011 finals, Bosh moved to center and became one of the first stretch 5s in the league, redefining the center position forever. After LeBron left, Bosh was back to averaging over 20 points, but then a blood clot injury forced him to retire at the age of 31. If he was able to play for the next 6 or 7 years, Bosh would probably be close to 25,000 points and over 10,000 rebounds, joining some of the most elite company in NBA history. But Chris Bosh isn't the only underrated power forward in recent memory. This next player would be much more suited for today's pace and space game, where he would dominate with his versatility. Andrei Kirilenko was a 6'9" power forward. But because he also had a 7'4" wingspan and could move like a guard, the Russian established himself as the premier defensive player in the NBA. During his decade-long tenure with the Jazz, Kirilenko averaged 1.4 steals and 2 blocks per game, including the 3.3 blocks per game in 2005, which led the NBA. AK-47 was the first non-center to lead the league in block shots, becoming the first European to do it. And to this day, he's the shortest person to lead the NBA in blocks, together with Ben Wallace. But unlike Big Ben, Kirilenko could also score the ball. He could shoot the three and was a decent passer. His versatility was even more pronounced when he played on the national team, where he led Russia to gold in the 2007 Eurobasket and bronze in the 2012 London Olympics. And speaking of great European big men, before the days of Jokic and Nowitzki and the Gasol brothers, one European was making all-star teams and shooting the heck out of the ball. However, Detlef Schrempf doesn't get the recognition for being the first great European big man in the NBA, partly because he moved to the States as a high school senior and spent 4 years at the University of Washington. The 6'10" German joined the NBA in 1985.
The Dallas Mavericks select Detlef Schrempf of the University of Washington.
And from 1989 to 1999, he averaged 16 points, 7 rebounds, and 4 assists, shooting 50% from the field, 38% from 3, and 81% from the free throw line. Schrempf was the first European player to make the All-Star team, the second to ever make the All-NBA team, and the first to win the 6th Man of the Year award, doing so in 1991 and 1992. But today's NBA is a much different league than it was 30 or 40 years ago, and is mostly dominated by point guards. In the 2025 season, there are 13 point guards averaging over 20 points per game, while in 1998, there was only one, Allen Iverson. Before Iverson, point guards were never the highest scorers on their team, and their role was to set up the offense and facilitate. For that reason, there are many point guards from the 90s and 2000s who are underrated, even though they were ballers. Andre Miller was nicknamed the Professor because he was taking people to school on a nightly basis. With his fundamentally sound and yet very deep bag of tricks, Miller led the NBA in assists in 2002, and between 2000 and 2013, he averaged 14 points and 7 dimes per game, which doesn't sound like much today. But if you watched Miller play, you could always count on at least one highlight every night. A player of similar ilk was Sam Cassell, who averaged 18 points and 6.5 assists per game between 1995 and 2006. Cassell ran the offense like a tight ship, and his leadership was instrumental on 3 championship teams. Mark Jackson also deserves to be mentioned, and even though he averaged less than 10 points per game in his career, he's one of only 7 people with over 10,000 assists in the NBA. Another point guard, who's still currently playing, is also not known for his scoring, and he's a poster boy for a really good all-around player that's likely not going to end up in the Hall of Fame. Kyle Lowry is a 6-time All-Star, an NBA champion, and an Olympic gold medalist. But when there's a discussion about the best point guards of this millennium, his name rarely gets mentioned. Lowry's reputation took a hit during the LeBronto era, when James was routinely whooping the Raptors, with Lowry having a couple of bad shooting series. But overall in his career, Kyle has been an extremely clutch player, especially during the 2018 playoffs and the 2019 championship run. Other than Chris Paul, Lowry is probably the best defensive player at 6 feet or less, always ready to draw a charge and make plays that don't show up in the box score. Another borderline Hall of Famer has a career very similar to Lowry, with 4 All-Star appearances and 2 All-NBA selections, and 1 NBA title. His nickname was the Matrix. Sean Marion was one of the first 3-and-D players in modern NBA history. During his 9-year tenure with the Suns, Marion averaged 18 points, 10 rebounds, 2 steals, and 1.4 blocks per game, routinely guarding the best opposing player and hitting timely shots. Marion is just one of 16 players in NBA history with at least 10,000 rebounds, 1,000 blocks, and 17,000 points. And he's the only one on that list who's not a Hall of Famer. And do you know how many players have scored over 20,000 points in their career but are still not in the Hall of Fame? There are only 4. LaMarcus Aldridge, Joe Johnson, Tom Chambers, and Antoine Jamison. Aldridge was a mid-range artist who made 5 All-NBA teams, but he only made 1 conference finals. Because of that, he was never mentioned amongst the NBA elite. A similar story is with Joe Johnson, who made 7 All-Star teams, but never made the conference finals, even though he's one of the best isolation scorers of all time.
Who was the most underrated one-on-one player of my era?
ISO Joe.
I was just about to say that. Joe Johnson. He got a name, ISO Joe.
ISO Joe.
And we still don't give him credit for it.
But in the end, being underrated is subjective. And for some people, certain players will feel more underrated than others. So we gotta give a mention to a couple legends in the post like Al Jefferson and Zach Randolph, defensive guards from the 80s like Mookie Blaylock and Alvin Robertson, three-point marksmen such as Jeff Hornacek, Glenn Rice, and Dale Ellis, and Swiss Army knives like Doug Christie, Cedric Maxwell, and Shane Battier. What do you think? Did we miss anyone? Let us know in the comments if we did. And thanks for watching. If you like this video, we have another one for you right here.
আজকে আমরা রাখতে যাচ্ছি এই কিউট র্যাবিটটা। তোমরা এই র্যাবিটটার চিত্র সবসময় আমার ভিডিওর ডান পাশে দেখতে পারবে। তোমরা ওকে আমাকে কমেন্টে বলে যাও তোমাদেরটা কেমন হয়েছে। তো চলো আমাদের আঁকাটা শুরু করি। তো সর্বপ্রথম আমি এঁকে নিচ্ছি আমাদের র্যাবিটের চুল, আর সেটা কিন্তু খুবই কিউট হচ্ছে। আমার কাছে তো এই র্যাবিটটা খুবই কিউট লাগছে, এই জন্যই আমি আঁকতেছি। এরপর আমি শুরু করে দিলাম ওর মুখের কিছুটা অংশ আঁকা। তো তোমরা দেখতে থাকো কীভাবে আমি শুরুতে ওর চশমার উপরের পার্টটা এঁকে নিলাম, তারপর বাম পাশের যে কানটা ওইটা হালকা একটু এঁকে নিলাম, পুরোটা আঁকলাম না। তারপর চশমাটা কিছুক্ষণ আঁকলাম। তোমরা দেখতেই পাচ্ছ কীভাবে চশমাটা আঁকতেছি আমি। তোমরাও আমার ভিডিওটা পুরোপুরি দেখা চশমাটাও আঁকা শিখা যাবা, নো প্রবলেম। পরের দিন থেকে আরও ভালো ভালো ভিডিও আসবে, সবাই পুরো ভিডিওটা দেখতে থাকো। এরপর আমি ওর চশমার বাকি অংশটা প্রথমে ভাবছিলাম আঁকবো, পরে ভাবছি না, প্রথমে ভাবছি আঁকবো না, কিন্তু পরে ভাবলাম যে না এঁকেই নেই। তো এই যে এঁকে নিলাম আমি আমার চশমার ওর চশমার বাকি অংশটা। এরপর কানটা শুরু করলাম, যে কানটা আগে শেষ করা দরকার। এরই মধ্যে চলে গেছে আমার বাসার কারেন্ট, কী করবো? তারপর আবার ফ্ল্যাশ লাইট মোবাইলে চালিয়ে হাঁকা শুরু করে দিলাম। তো শুরুতে আমি খেয়াল করি নাই যে ব্লার আসতেছে, ফোকাস করি নাই। এরপর যে দেখলাম ব্লার আসতেছে না, এরপর কিছুক্ষণ পরে আমি ওটার ফোকাস দিয়ে দিই কিছুটা, এই জায়গা দিয়ে আবার ব্লারটা সরে গেছে, সমস্যা নেই, কিন্তু আসবে, সমস্যা নেই। তারপরে যে কানটা পুরো আঁকা শেষ, এটা তোমরা হয়তো দেখতে পারতেছো না। কিছুক্ষণ ওয়েট করো, বেশি সময় লাগবে না, কারণ আমি তো চাইলে এখন এডিটিংয়ের মধ্যে এটা ব্লারটা সরাইতে পারবো না। ওই কানের ভিতরের অংশটা আমি এখানে নয় যে দেখতে পাচ্ছ মিষ্টি কালার টাইপের যেটা, ওইটা। তারপর কানের নিচের যে একটা ছোটো কান আছে ওইটা আঁকলাম, কিন্তু দেখলাম যে আঁকাটা ঠিক হয়নি, পরে রাবার দিয়ে কিছুটা মুছে দেবো আমি। এই যে এখন আমি ব্লাডটা ঠিক করে দিছি, আর এই যে এখন আমি রাবারটা দিয়ে মুছে নিয়েছি আগেই। আর এখন এই যে কানের ওইটা আঁকলাম। দেন এই যে নাকের অংশটা আমি এঁকে নিলাম। ও আচ্ছা, এর মধ্যে আমি নিচের গলার অংশটা এঁকে ফেলছি। এখন এই যে নাকের আর ওর যে সুন্দর সুন্দর কয়েকটা যে পশম আছে, ওই পশমগুলো আঁকতে গেলাম। পরে ভাবলাম যে না, নাকের নিচের আমি মুখের অংশটা মুখের আগে আঁকা লাগবে, সেটা না আঁকলে যে পশমগুলো তুমি ঠিকভাবে দিতে পারবো না। তারপর আমি যে দাঁতটা এঁকে নিলাম ওর, পরে পশমটা দিয়ে দিলাম। হ্যাঁ, তোমরা দিতে পারছো, শুধুমাত্র তোমরা এই জায়গায় কলমটা বসায় পরে একটা টান দিয়ে দেবা, দেখবা পশমটা সুন্দর মতন এসে পড়ছে। তো এবার আমি শুরু করে দিলাম ওর টি শার্টের কাজ। ওর টি শার্টটা লাল রঙের, যেটা আমার কাছে একটু বেশি ভালো লাগছে। আর এটার কালার গ্রেডিংটা যে হয়েছে না, ওরা যা কালার গ্রেডিংটা করছে ছবির মধ্যে, ওইটা দেখে তো আমি পাগল হয়ে গেছি ভাই। তোমরা এটা চাইলে প্রিন্টারেস্টের মধ্যে খুঁজে পাবো, বা আমার ভিডিও থেকে এই জায়গা থেকে স্ক্রিনশট নিয়ে নিতে পারো। আর আমার বোনে ভুলে আমার হাতের মধ্যে একটা ধাক্কা দিয়ে দেয়, এই জন্য আমার ওই জায়গাতে মানে এলোমেলো দাগ পড়ে যায়, কিন্তু আমি আবার পরে মুচ্ছা নেই। কিন্তু পরে আমি জানতাম না যে ওই দাগের সাইড দিয়ে আবার ওই রকম টাইপেরই আবার একটা দাগ দেওয়া লাগবে আমার। তোমরা দেখতে পাচ্ছ ওই যে হাতের পাশে একটু ছোট্ট একটু লাল অংশ, ওইটাই ওই দাগটা দিয়ে হয়ে যেত চাইলে। এবার আমি হাতটা এঁকে নিলাম। এই যে জামার নিচের অংশটাও আমি আঁকা শেষ করে দিচ্ছি, এখন প্যান্টটা শুরু করে দিব। এই যে দেখতে পাচ্ছ প্যান্টটা, এই দেখো ওই জায়গা দিয়ে আমার ডাক্তার দেওয়া লাগছে, কিন্তু মানে তোমার নাম উঠলো ওই তো। পরে পুরো প্যান্টটা দিয়ে দিচ্ছি। তোমরা চাইলে ভিডিওটা 2x দিয়ে দেখতে পারো, ওটা আমার কিছু যায় আসে না, তোমাদের টাইম না থাকলে 2x দিয়ে দেখো, কিন্তু স্কিপ করো না ভাই। যে দুটা লেস দিয়ে দিলাম ওর প্যান্টের। পরে এখন ওর পিছে দেখতে পাচ্ছ, ওর পিছে 7টা একটু ওর লেজ আছে, ওই লেজটা আঁকবো। এখন খরগোশের তো লেজ হবে কি, লেজ ছাড়া খরগোশ তো হয় না, এই জন্য লেজটা এঁকে দিলাম আমি। এবার পাটা খুবই চিকন পার, এটা কিন্তু পার যে পাতা ওইটা অনেক বড়, আমি ওরকমই আঁকলাম। আর ব্যাকগ্রাউন্ডে যদি কোনো নয়েস আসে তাহলে ওটা ইগনোর করে দিও, কারণ আমি এখন ভাই কারেন্ট নাই, এর মধ্যে আমি আঁকতেছি, মানে ভয়েস ওভার দিতেছি। আচ্ছা, আমার ড্রয়িংটা শেষ, এখন তোমরা গেস মানে বলো কীরকম হয়েছে ড্রয়িংটা। আর আমার কাছে তো ভালো লাগছে, আর এটার কালারিং যে পার্টটা ওইটা আসবে খুবই শীঘ্রই, ওইটার জন্য ওয়েট করতে থাকো, এটা আইসা পড়বে, তারপর তোমরা কালারিংটা যে হবে না ভাই, ওটা আমার রেকর্ড করা হয়েছে কিন্তু ভিডিও দেওয়া হবে না, এখন পরের ভিডিওতে আসবে। তো বাই বাই।